Okay, guys, back again. My name's Craig. Welcome back to All Nerd and Everything. If you're new here, I discuss everything from films, comic books, TV shows, wrestling, anime, yada 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 yada. You know the usual, intro. And I've been late discussing this because I've been putting it off, watching other things, and I still need to do a review on Daredevil Born Again because I have so much to say about that. I need to finish the last two episodes, but The Last of Us season 2 just premiered, and damn, this was a good start to the the second season. Now, the first season just laid the foundation of what the Last of Us world is about, but season 2, which is based on part 2 of the video game. Now, I did not play part 2 of the video game just based on the negative reception of the game and the gameplay that I saw of part 2. It did not look it just didn't look fun to me at all. And the usually when video games come out, I typically like to watch gameplay or walkthroughs of the video game before I actually decide if I want to purchase it myself, because I don't want to spend 67 $70 on a game and it turns out to be, garbage. And I'm still upset that The Last of Us Part 2 won Video Game of the Year over Ghost of Tsushima. And that game was phenomenal. That's one of my favorite video games of all time. And the fact that it lost to The Last of Us Part 2, that is still horrendous to me. But The Last of Us Season 2 starts off with a recap of the events of Season 1 with, with Ellie being told by Joel that that he wasn't lying about, the fireflies and that whole situation. And by the way, this has been a talking point since part 2 came out. Now, as for Joel lying to Ellie, I think, yeah, he definitely should have told the truth. However, we don't know if the experiment on Abby, I mean not on Abby, on Ellie was going to work. The Fireflies were just going to cut her open and use her as a lab rat to experiment to see if the virus was going to cure everyone, and they didn't even take into consideration to check if she was the right if the if her blood was going to work. I mean, they didn't think about that. They were just gonna cut her open and just, experiment on her like a frog in science class. I mean, what's up with that? I don't hear a lot of people talking about that at all. So in my opinion, you can disagree with me if you want, but in my opinion, I don't think Joel did the wrong thing at all. He definitely did the wrong thing by keeping it a secret and lying to Ellie. However, I don't think he did the wrong thing by stopping the fireflies from, you know, cutting Ellie open and using her to try to cure the rest of the world. What if it didn't work, and then they would have, you know, used her as a guinea pig for nothing? So yeah, so I went on a tangent, but yeah, that's been a discussing point for about the game for over 10 years now. But the season premiere of the season 2 premiere of The Last of Us was freaking excellent. Excellent. Now we see the falling out of Joel's lie to Ellie and how it's tampered their relationship, and how it's taking an effect on Joel's mental health. And something that isn't talked about enough in a lot of post-apocalyptic films and TV shows is, people's mental well-being being in situations like this, losing loved ones and having to fight for survival, fight for food, and not being able to trust anyone. You definitely need a a a therapist in situations like these. So I think that the show writers adding a therapist to the show for Joel's character, especially to discuss his PTSD and his depression that he's suffering, was a great way to humanize him and show how his lie is putting a causing this drift between him and Ellie. And Ellie, you can tell she knows something is definitely off, but and she knows that Joel is lying, but uh, we'll see what happens later on, because I don't know if this is exactly going to follow the video game of part two, because I really, really hope it does not do that. But as as for Ellie and Abby's situation, when it comes to Abby, who's played by Caitlin Dever, great actress, was in Booksmart, No Time to Die, no no one will die. The Alien movie. I'm blanking off the top of my head, but she looks like Abby. This is a very small nitpick. She looks like Abby, but my only problem is that they introduced her way too early. I think it would have been better if they would have planted the seeds of Abby in this episode, and then maybe in episode three, or however many episodes they're gonna have. Example, if they're gonna have 10 episodes, they could have introduced her in episode 3 or 4, and that way when Abby finally shows up and Ellie finds out who Abby is, it causes a bigger damper on her relationship with Joel. And it also shows how Joel's lie not only affected their relationship, but it affected everyone else in their vicinity, and everyone else that they aren't aware of. So I think they should have built upon Abby in this episode and just not shown her until episode 3 or 4, or however many episodes they should have had. They're going to have this season. They should have introduced her later on. And another thing, no disrespect to Caitlin Dever, but I think one or two things should have happened. They should have either casted a different actress that physically looks the part of Abby, and not just physically as in appearance, but physically as in, muscular, body wise. But also, Caitlyn, they probably should have, requested her to work out for the role and, just add some muscles, because the thing about Abby and Ellie is it's David versus Goliath. If anyone has played the video game of The Last of Us Part 2, Abby physically is a physical challenge for Ellie. It's a like I said, it's a David Goliath situation. So to see Ellie, you know, try to go up against someone that physically matches her, or is just physically imposing to her, is would be very scary to see, especially considering that Abby looks like I mean, she's practically built like a freaking bodybuilder. So I think the physical part of Ellie is that her pain represents how she looks on the outside. So that would have been very important to cast, as opposed to casting someone as opposed to casting someone that just looks like her in the face. I think it would have been important to cast someone that not only not only looks like Abby, but also that can convey that their pain represents how they physically look on the outside, if that makes sense. And the clickers, improving on the clickers in this was freaking dope as hell. Like making the clickers way smarter. One of my favorite scenes is, at is Ellie chasing down this clicker, and the clicker outsmarts her and attacks her, and now Ellie has become the hunted. And from previously being the hunter to the hunted, the clicker pops out of nowhere and hides from her and attacks her. Good thing she's immune, but the one thing that I really love about this is that it showed that the clickers aren't mindless zombies, and that they improve on just being that they're more than just mindless zombies. Because in a lot of these, horror movies and TV shows and post apocalyptic world, projects, anything that has a monster in it, whether it's a vampire, zombie, whatever it is, they don't show their intelligence enough. So the fact that we get smart clickers that make the humans think on their feet was very well done. And aside from those small nitpicks I have about Abby, this was a great first intro to the season 2 of The Last of Us, and I can't wait to see what the rest of the season holds. I still think they should have held off on Abby, and I still think, in my opinion, Abby should have been, physically bigger, not only in muscle size but also height as well, to give that David versus Goliath vibe with her and Ellie. But other than that, I don't really have any complaints about this at all. Just small little nitpicks that I just talked about. But other than that, I give this rating wise, I'm going to rate it 7.5 out of 10. If you guys have seen The Last of Us Season 2, let me know your thoughts on the first episode. I'd love to hear feedback from you guys. And do you think Joel was wrong for what he did? I still think no, but I'd love to have a respectful disagreement with you guys in comments. So until then, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys in my next video.